Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this session tonight. We're going to be looking at writing an abstract today. So it's just one issue, but a very critical issue in terms of your writing process. I apologize, I've just experienced load shedding. So apologies that I'm in the dark. But yes, as I was saying, today we're going to be looking at writing an abstract. And it's a blast session, so we're just going to be focusing on that. And for those who've never attended any of my sessions, my name is Professor Puleng Sekgalo, and I look forward to sharing some thoughts with you tonight. I'm going to share my presentation. And as I do that, I will be switching off my video so that we can all just focus on the presentation. Right, so an abstract is very important for your thesis and your dissertation, but also as you're writing for publication as well. So what is an abstract? It is a short summary of the work that you're currently busy with, unpublished work, or it's a summary of work that you've published. You would have seen when you were doing your literature review, all the articles that you would have downloaded and looked at, that they all have abstracts. It's a summary of your research paper, and it's usually about 6 to 7 sentences. And it's between 150 and 250 words. Okay, so it really must be a summary of the work. And you have to be very clear and very decisive in terms of what it is that you want to have included in your abstract. So what is it that an abstract does? It gives me, as the reader of your work, an idea of what the paper is about, right? And many of the readers decide based on the abstracts whether to read the full paper or not. So how you tell the story or how you sell your paper in the abstract will determine whether the person would want to read the whole paper or not. But also it offers the reader a glimpse of what methods did you use? Was the study qualitative or quantitative? Am I qualitative and quantitative inclined? So as I look at the literature review, for example, or as I look at a relevant study that I might want to draw from, how is your methodology maybe going to be useful for me? So maybe I'm interested in the methodology that you use. So give a glimpse of that in the abstract so that the reader can already get a sense of the methodology or the methods that we used in the study. And then how did you analyze your data? How was the information analyzed? And then what is overall argument that you're making? What is this paper about? And this we can tell from the argument that you are making as the writer. Okay. If I didn't have time, there are people, a colleague earlier today was reminding us of this idea of the elevator pitch, right? So if I didn't have time to read your whole paper, if it's an article, let's say it's 15 or 20 pages, if I didn't have time to read all the 20 pages, will I still get a glimpse of your study? Would I still get a glimpse of your work by just reading the abstract, right? What are the key issues that you would like me to take with as the reader? And all of this have to be put together in these 6 or 7 sentences. So it's something that you really need to sit and think clearly about. We always say it's easy to write and very difficult to write a short paper because you might have a lot to say, but you only have limited space or limited time. So how do you then take all of that you need to say and put it succinctly in just 6 and 7 sentences, but doing that without losing the essence of what it is that you want to write about? And then something I also wanted to mention was that it's worth remembering that your Google Scholar, and other related search engines and bibliographic databases use abstracts. And so you want, when I search for work on a particular topic, you would want your abstract to also appear if your work is maybe aligned to what I'm looking for. So how are you structuring your abstract in a way that make the search engine pick up your work easily? Because if you're interested in becoming a scholar, if you want to be a researcher whose work is cited, whose work is read, whose work is looked at by other scholars, then your work has to easily be picked up by the bibliographic databases. There are other people who are doing work maybe in a similar field or similar topic as yours. So which means if I do my literature review, I might get 500 articles. So how would I end up with yours? If I get all these abstracts, what is it about your abstract that's going to stand out? Or what is it about your abstract that you've highlighted the critical things that if somebody punches something into the search engine, that your abstract would be one of those that would pop up? Because if that happens, then it means the likelihood is that I might want to read your work. And if I read your work, then it means your citations also go up. All right. So the creativity when it comes to the title of your research, think about your proposal right now. Think about your dissertational thesis right now. What is the title of your work? Is it catchy? Does it capture what your work wants to do? What is it in your title that will make the search engine pick your work easily, right? And if you've got something like South Africa is very broad, and chances are then to get thousands and thousands and thousands of hits if I South Africa. So how are you putting words together in your title that would assist in the search engine picking up your work? And the key words also, the terms that you use in your titles, the terms that you use in your abstracts are very, very important. You would have seen that we also, as supervisors or those who've published before, one of the things that are always required is key terms or keywords. So what are your keywords? Give us 5 keywords that capture the work. So if somebody is doing work on genome sequencing, that would go into your keyword, so that if anyone is doing work in that area, so that when they type and click that, your work would appear. So that would go into your key terms or your keywords that you would use in your abstract. So what you include in your abstract and in your title, as I've just said, are crucial for helping other researchers find your paper or article, all right? And in this case, to find your dissertation or thesis. We always say we don't want our thesis or dissertations to just gather dust in the library. Luckily now, in this AI era that we're living in, things are online, right? So your dissertation and thesis are also in the repository and they are available online. So you want people to know and to read about the work that you've conducted. And this becomes possible if your abstract is to the point and it covers all the work that you've done in the main body of your work. Right. So what are some of the typical points that would be found in an abstract? You will need to think about the context, right? So what is this research about? What is maybe the broad idea that you want to refer to as an opening to the work that you're going to be talking about? So the context or the background information for your research. This would be your first or your first 2 sentences. The general topic under study, the specific topic of your research. You know, much has been written about this. Not a lot has been given attention on this particular issue. We have seen an increase in what. So that opening statement, that already tells me, oh, okay, yeah, there's been an increase in this. Not a lot of attention has been paid to something. So, okay, so what is this telling me? What is the next thing? I want to read the next sentence. So how you open your abstract as well is also very important, okay? And then based on this context that you've now given your reader, or this background, you now go to what is it that your work is about? What is it that you're bringing in? How are you joining this conversation, or how are you aiming to address this issue that you've just highlighted, right? And here we're talking about the central questions, or a statement that you would then make, right, of the problem that your research addresses. And you'll see as I go through these points, it's almost as if it's the introduction chapter, or the introductory part of your work, to say what is the background. And remember, in your introduction, or where you give the overview or background of your study, you have space, right? So you have a couple of abstract paragraphs that you can use to be able to provide us with a broader context. But now you need to take that paragraph, or those 2 paragraphs, or those 3 paragraphs, depending on how long your contextualization is, and say, with these 3 paragraphs, what is the one sentence that I can come up with that can encapsulate all of these things that I'm saying here right now, right? What I'm saying in these 3 paragraphs, how can I say them in one sentence? Often not very easy, but very much feasible. Again, that elevator pitch. You meet somebody in the elevator, you want to tell them about your research, maybe you need funding or whatever. How do you do that within that, going from the 1st to the 3rd floor when someone maybe will be getting out of the lift? But making sure that you've made your point. So it's very, very important. And this you can only do if you really have a grasp on your work, a grasp on your research. You're very clear about what the problem is. You're very clear about how you're going to approach it. You're very clear about the steps that need to be taken, or that you have taken, to respond to this problem. And you're very clear about what the possible way forward is. And all of these things are things that would then go into your abstract, right? What's already known, what's there? Hey, we know that gender-based violence is a challenge, is an issue, is a problem in South Africa. That's something that's already known. So if that's something that you're interested in, that you want to focus on, it's important for you to say, how am I entering this conversation? How am I joining this chorus of issues and statistics and challenges that have been highlighted around gender-based violence in South Africa? What's already known about it, and how am I coming into the conversation? What possible contribution would my work make in terms of responding to GBV, assisting us to understand it, getting the experiences? So how are you entering that conversation? Right? So what's already known about the question, and what previous research has been done or shown, right? Previous research shows that this is an issue in the context of South Africa, specifically looking at the rates of femicide in South Africa. Research has shown us that. We all know that. Previous research has shown this, statistics have shown this. So now that this is what's known, what is it that you are then doing with your research, right? So the main reason, the exigency or the rationale, the goals for your research, what is it you're aiming for? Is it that you're hoping to achieve? Why is it important to address these questions, right? Are you examining a new topic? Are you adding on something that already exists, but bringing in a different angle, or building on what already exists? Why is it important for us to continue examining this? I go back to the example of gender-based violence. Maybe it's important for us because we have not resolved it. There are processes and policies and things that are in place. However, we continue to have this problem. Could it be that maybe we need to look at it differently? Could it be that we need to rethink what's already there and maybe think about it in a different way? So why is that topic worth examining? It's worth examining because it continues to be relevant. It's worth examining because we have not resolved the issue at hand. It continues to be important because it is at the level of social justice and equality that we want, without which we cannot live in harmony with one another. Why is it important to do this, right? Are you feeling a gap in previous research, perhaps? So as I said, if it's something that's already been done, how are you joining that conversation and how are you taking that conversation forward? Or it could be that you're applying new methods that will assist us to have a fresh look at existing ideas or data. Many of the studies conducted in this area have been qualitative. So I'm bringing in a quantitative perspective to assist us in these ways. Or maybe what's being done is quantitative. We understand quantitatively, but what are the experiences? What are the perceptions? How do people think and feel and experience this phenomena? So I'm going to look at it from a different angle, right? So I'm going to give it a fresh look, looking at it from a different perspective, using a different method to answer this question. And perhaps when we do that, we will get a more deeper, broader understanding of the issue, right? Or there seems to be disagreement in literature. Many scholars say this, while other scholars say this. So I'm interested to bring all of these into conversation with each other and say, how can maybe looking at things in a different way from what these scholars are looking at, or maybe even supporting the other school of thought, but providing more reasons and arguments for this, or more experiments for this, could assist us to be able to understand this better. So all of these things that I'm saying would be things that form the broader, bigger part of your project. However, then you need to think about all of these things that I've just mentioned and say, how do I then communicate this to my reader in 6 to 7 sentences, right? Your methods, I've already spoken about that. You need to include your findings, your results, and then saying, this is the argument. This is how I think this can go forward. These are my conclusions based on this. And then in the actual work, in the paper itself, you will then expand on how you came to those conclusions or how you came to those recommendations that you're making. And then the significance as well, that if we look at things this way, or we use this particular method, it can assist us in these ways. Last sentence, and that's it. And then as I sit and I look at your abstract, I can then say, okay, I'm interested to know more about these implications of this study because I'm doing something similar, or I'm grappling with these questions around this phenomena, and let me see what this scholar has said about some of the implications of doing things in this particular way or asking these questions in these ways. So that already then captures my interest. And if my interest is captured, what would I want to do? I would want to get access to your paper and then be able to read the full paper and gain insight from your work. But also, something worth mentioning is that with these days, unfortunately, publications online, copyright, all of it, and then it's behind a paywall. So if I read your abstract and I'm interested in what you have to say, I would even be willing, perhaps, if I don't have access through my institution, I would be willing to pay that $15 that maybe the publisher wants, or the $20 that they want, to be able to get access to your article, right? So remember that sometimes, unfortunately, work that is online is not open access. You might not get access to the full article. The only thing that you've got access to is the abstract. So your abstract has to be appealing in such a way that someone would read it and be willing to pay to read the whole article, right? So you really need to give serious thought and time to decide what those 6 or 7 sentences are going to be on your abstract. So these are just some of the points that you need to think about that have to be found in an abstract. I know it seems like a lot, considering that I'm saying it can only be 6 to 7 sentences, which is why I'm saying for you to be able to calm down to 6 and 7 sentences, you really need to apply your mind. You really need to have a grasp of the narrative that you have told in your dissertation or your thesis or the article. Such a lot of work for one to be able to do this work, to be able to do the work that they've done and to come up with the abstract that they've come up with. All right. Okay. So when do you write your abstract? There's a school of thought that says you can put everything together at the beginning, or you put everything together at the end, just like the introduction. But of course, you need to have done the work for you to be able to know precisely how things are going to be put together. It's work that you would have already done, so you would then speak about it. It's work that you would have already conducted, hence you'll be able to have findings. You can imagine your findings or already presuppose what your findings are going to be. So write the abstract at the end. It will make your life easier. When you've completed the rest of the text, then you can sit and say, okay, how do I summarize everything in a coherent manner, and including all these different points that need to be in the abstract. So in a nutshell, what I said in the previous slide is that you need to say, what is my research problem, right? What is the research problem and what are my objectives? And then based on this, then you're able to then speak to the importance or the need for this work that you're doing. And then what methods have you used? And what are your key results or arguments? And then what are your conclusions? So as you'll see, what I've said here is very much similar to here, but here just in a nutshell, in a clear and concise manner, so that when you think about the sentences that I spoke about, you know what each one should entail. All right, I'll continue giving more examples. So start by defining the purpose of your research, right? What practical or theoretical problem does the research respond to? Or what research question did you aim to answer, right? It still goes back to the research problem and the objectives. What is it that you wanted to answer? You can include brief context, as I've said, on the social or academic relevance of your topic. Why is this an important topic? But don't go into detail, as I've said, because you only have a few sentences to be able to do this. One sentence should be enough, at the most 2 sentences, but ideally about 1 sentence. After identifying the problem, which you would already have when you've done the work, you know what your objective is in the study. So you use verbs like to investigate, right? The study, investigate, or in this paper, investigate I aimed at testing this, I aimed to analyze, or I was interested in evaluating. And how I went about it was through 1, 2, 3. So the verbs that you use also will assist the reader to be able to know what is it that you did. Did you investigate something, test something, maybe an experiment? Did you analyze something? Did you evaluate? Did you want to get an understanding of a phenomena? So these will then assist you to describe what is it that your study set out to do, right? And here, you can either write this in the present tense or you can write it in the past simple tense. But it should never refer to the future, because ideally you are writing a paper on something that you've already done. Right, so you're not going to write the paper on, we will be testing, we will be analyzing, or I will be analyzing. This study aims to, or is aiming to do something in the future, right? Because what you want to do, or what you have, is work that's already done that you are reporting on. So when you write an article, you've already done the work. When you write your thesis, as you know, you've already done the work. So you speak about the processes in your thesis of your methodology, the literature that you've already conducted, that you are engaging with in your chapter on literature. This is work that you've already done, and it's work that is completed. Okay. So when you doing your work right now, for those of you who are busy with your thesis or dissertation, or even your proposal, right? When you start thinking about the abstract, as you're writing your work, already think about what are some of the possible relevant things that would go into an abstract. So for each of your chapter, we spoke about the background, the context, the research problem, the method, the analysis, all of that. And if you think about it that way, when you think about your abstract, it's like each sentence in your abstract is a chapter in your thesis, right? So for each chapter or for each section in your work, what are the keywords? What are the keywords? And then take from these keywords and then formulate a sentence that captures that chapter, right? So if, for example, you're contextualizing in the beginning, I said, when you do your introduction chapter in your thesis or dissertation, you would have a number of paragraphs. So you read these paragraphs and say, okay, what is the gist of all of this? You look at your theoretical framework and say, okay, here's a whole section in my work on theoretical framework. So how can I say all of this in one sentence, right? So what are the keywords in terms of what theoretical framework, the importance of this, how is it assisting me to make sense of my work? So putting all that together and then coming up with a sentence. So you do this for all the different chapters and sections, and this will help you because then you will have a flowing argument in a way. You'll have this abstract that's like your concise, mini compressed dissertation that's just in one paragraph. These sentences are meant, therefore, to summarize the central point or argument of that section. What is the central point in your theoretical framework section? What is the central point in your research methodology, the methodology section? What is the central point in the interpretation or analysis chapter of your work? So now imagine you've got 20 pages discussing something, and then from these 20 pages, you need to come up with just one sentence, right? Imagine that. So what is it that is at the core that you might want to have as something that speaks to what your study found? Okay. And when you've done this, and when you think about it that way, then you already have a framework for the structure of your abstract. Right. And then when you have that, then you can sit with the summary, you can sit with this abstract, And then you can revise and revise again, restructure the sentence, say it differently, but you have something that you are working with, right? And as you put these sentences together, they have to be put together in a coherent manner, right? So you might already have a sentence on this, a sentence on that, a sentence on this chapter, a sentence on that chapter. Now, after doing that, all these sentences have to be put together. And when you put these sentences together, do they make sense? Do they flow? Will the reader be able to read this and get a sense of where you started and where you ended, right? So you need to make those connections, but it should be somewhat easier, not necessarily to do this when you already have something that you're working with. Avoid unnecessary filler words. Furthermore, in addition, alternatively, however, these are really avoid these in your abstract. Where there's a need, you can do that. This and that and that, and in addition to that, this and that and that. But don't have many of these, 3 or 4 in an abstract. That's a lot, and it makes your work look a bit clumsy, and you don't want that, right? And also avoid obscure jargon. We know that in all our respective disciplines, there are certain words, there's certain jargon that we use. My colleagues in law would know this very well. But for all the different disciplines, we know that when you're in the discipline, you're not only going to be speaking to your peers in terms of colleagues who are only in your discipline. If you're thinking that way, then you really need to change your thinking, because you don't want to think narrow as a scholar, as a researcher. If you're doing work on environmental science, on the well-being of soil and the importance of soil in what we plant, and the well-being of animals, what language are you going to, would someone who is sitting in political science be able to read that abstract and make sense of it, right? I know that in many of the journals, it is the jargon is used there, because we know that, okay, my audience are people in the field, and they should just get it, because they also in the discipline and they work with these words all the time. While that is good, try as much as possible to not only use jargon that will exclude other readers. Remember, we spoke about also trying to get, or working towards getting people to read work. Do you only want people in your discipline reading your work? Do you only want people in your field reading your work? And if that's the aim, then by all means. However, ideally, you would want to produce work that other people can also draw from and learn from, right? So if I'm in psychology and I'm interested in the ways in which people connect to the land, how people connect to the soil, how people connect to the environment and what's in the environment, the role of gardening and what people plant, right? And how this speaks to people's mood and their sense of being. I would want to read a paper maybe in environmental sciences that speaks to vegetation, that speaks to the soil, that speaks to things that I'm interested in, maybe as an environmental psychologist. But if the work in that area is only written in such a way that only those in environmental sciences can understand, then there is a missed opportunity in terms of us learning from each other across disciplines. So I think as you're thinking about your own work, as you're doing your work, even before you get to maybe publishing your work, you need to keep this in mind, that how would I want my work to contribute not only to the body of knowledge, but to contribute towards understanding broadly this phenomena that I'm engaging with, because we want to also avoid you doing research. You're going to spend 2 years, 3 years, 4 years of your life conducting this research. And then after that research, only a few people, few peers, 5 people in your discipline are engaged in your work. Is that really what you want? And so it's just very important to think about these things as you're doing your own research, regardless of the discipline that you're finding yourself in. All right. Yes, as I've said, it should be understandable to readers who are not familiar with your topic, your abstract, that is. So when you get to the core and the actual body of the work, people should still be able to understand your work. But of course, you may use your jargon because sometimes it is difficult really to write in a particular field without using jargon. That one, to not use it at all is not possible, because the jargon is also integral to our disciplines in how we make sense of things, but some are actually linked to the theories that we're using. So you can't use a particular theory or particular theorem or a particular way of doing things without using a particular jargon. All right. And in those moments, at those points, of course, use the jargon, but then write your work in the fuller sense, in a way that other people can be able to understand, relate, engage with it. I know some of my colleagues here or students who are, especially in the natural sciences, it's often not so easy, but it's something that we can learn, and it's something that we should always be attempting to do when we're thinking, for example, about public science. So thinking beyond just writing for an academic audience, that if they were to call you tomorrow on one of the national radio stations, would community members be able to listen to that radio station and the interview in that radio and understand what you were talking about? So also about that way. All right. And of course, the abstract should focus on your own research. And this is important because you only have 200 words. You only have 250 words. At the most, you only have 300 words. If you are allowed these 300 words, it's often, like, I think the max in terms of word count. So the purpose of the abstract is to report the original contributions of your research, as I've said. So avoid discussions or discussing other people's work. Literature will come later in the body of the work. Do not discuss literature in your abstract. You don't have space for that. There is no space for literature. We want to hear your voice. We want to hear about the work that you've done. You may include just a quick summary on scholarly background. Like I said, when you say, often in the body, when students say a lot of research has been done on this, and we would ask, a lot of research has been done by whom, when, and what did they do, right? So in the content, the body of your work, you can indicate a lot of research, see so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so's work has been done, focusing on this and that and the other. But in the abstract, because the assumption is that you're going to go in depth in the content. So you can say there's been considerable work, or a lot of work that has been done in this particular area, right? With this paper or in this article, I'm focusing on blah, 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 right? So you're not going to say considerable work, as can be seen by Leroux and Nkosi and Kumalo and what. No, you don't have space for that. You are wasting your word count. So don't do that. Summarize and then show how this is relevant, because it also shows how your work, or what you're bringing in, is relevant for the broader debate in that particular issue or in that particular area. And already as a reader, I'm already thinking, oh, okay, this person is aware of what's in the field. They're aware of work that exists in the field, just like that. All right. But as I said, don't mention specific publications, not in the abstract, right? So you're not going to include citations. As far as possible, do not include citations. I must say, I've seen some abstracts where they would refer to where there's a citation in the abstract. That's not common. That's not advisable. Try as much as possible not to include citations in the abstracts, right? You might be writing a theoretical paper. You might be writing a conceptual paper. You might be writing a paper where you are critiquing a particular theory, right? And obviously then in that case, you would also maybe mention, right? So-and-so's theory that looks at this and that and that. With this paper, I'm in conversation with so-and-so's theory, or in this paper, I'm highlighting the shortcomings of the theory, or in this paper, I am contributing to the theory on what, as has been written or popularized or engaged by so-and-so and so-and-so. So if you're responding directly to another study or another theory, then you can mention the person's name, so-and-so's theory that deals with this, and the work that I'm doing builds on that theory. The work that I'm doing challenges that theory. The work that I'm doing is in conversation with that theory, as I highlight 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so, but it has to be your voice that we're hearing in the abstract. Okay, so everything that I've just said right now, I just wanted to, again, come back to it just in a nutshell. So what have I been saying up to this point? What have I been saying in terms of writing an abstract, the parts of the abstract, the content of what needs to be in the abstract? And here, just visually, in terms of thinking, how many words or how many sentences per aspect of the abstract. So when you're thinking about the introduction sentence, it can be one, at the most 2 sentences. Where you introduce the topic, where you introduce the work to the reader. Here, you're explaining the topic, you're explaining the purpose, and you might be speaking to the importance of doing this. So the research question, the issue that you're bringing up. So that's the sentence or 2. So a broad overview, contextualization, and then saying, I'm adding to this, or with this research, this is what I'm doing, or this is what I'm responding to, this is what I'm asking. That's where you start, right? And then after that, you're saying, okay, I'm with the question that I'm asking, that you've asked already, you're saying this, I therefore endeavored, or I conducted research that did this, right? I conducted a qualitative study exploring this and that, or I explored this and that. So now you're bringing in the methodology. Here again, it's a sentence or 2 describing your research method. Using a qualitative study, I interviewed 5 people focusing on this and that and that. I interviewed 5 women based in wherever. So here it says you can include the type of data analysis also that you used. So using a qualitative study, I interviewed 5 people focusing on their experiences of gender-based violence. I analyzed the work using thematic analysis, drawing from 1, 2, and 3, right? So 2 sentences. Based on this, these are the findings, right? So the study reveals that 1, 2, 3, and 4. Again, here, 1 or 2 sentences describing the results. So what is it that your study found? What is it that it has revealed? What is it that you have found, right? So the findings. And then lastly, 1 or 2 sentences containing your conclusion. So based on this, based on what you've found, based on the findings, based on the results, what are your conclusions? What is it that you're suggesting? What is it that you want the reader to take with them, right? So here again, 1 or 2 sentences containing your conclusions and recommendations. I therefore highlight the need to do this. I suggest blah, blah, blah. I came up with a model that can assist us to do this and that and that. So that is what you would conclude. So you will see here, it's 1 or 2 sentences, 1 or 2, 1 or 2. So it can be anything there, again, between 6. And if we write 2 sentences, then that's 8. That's 8 sentences at the most. So somewhere you might have 1 sentence on an issue, and others you might have 2 sentences, but you do have that option to have 2. But again, remember, you're also guided by the word count, the word limits that you have, which would be given to you. So often for your dissertation or thesis, we often note that strict when it comes to word count for your abstract, but then later on when you're writing your article, there it's very strict. So you need to follow the guidelines of the journal that you'll be submitting to. So make sure that as you think about your abstract, these are things that you also then keep in mind. And you will see, if you look at the step-by-step processes, and you think about your own research, your dissertation, you will see that, okay, so basically, number 1, my first chapter or first and second chapter of my dissertation, where I introduce the topic, I speak about my objectives and significance of the study, all of that, and then also then engage literature as well, or speak about your theoretical frameworks, and you just need to decide what is it that you want to include or not include, right? So if you want to say something a little bit about your theoretical framework, that would fall under point 1. Okay, and then point 2, of course, would then be your chapter 3 or chapter 4, depending which goes under which chapter. But let's just say then it would be your methodology chapter. So from your methodology chapter, you will have point 2. And then from your findings chapter and your discussion chapter, whether they're together or separately, that would be your point 3. And then your last chapter, the conclusion of your dissertation, chapter 6, chapter 7, or chapter 8, depending on how many chapters you have, that would be number 4. So your number 4 would come from your last chapters in your dissertation. And then all of those together would then be your abstract. Okay. All right. I've already spoken about the word count. I've indicated that it's often 300 words max. I don't think I've seen you're working with the maximum of 300 words. There's some that for each and every step of your abstract or aspect of your abstract. Okay. The abstract would appear after the title page. You all know you have guidelines and how you acknowledgements as well. So all of that determined for UNISA, you know how that looks like. So the first page, when you submit, that's also something that's given to you by the institution, so you don't need to worry much about that. Okay. You've already stated your research problem, your methodology, your results, your conclusion. Make sure that you've mentioned any important limitations and recommendations. And also, as I've indicated already, so this is just a summary I'm giving you right now. An abstract can be understood by someone without prior knowledge of the topic. Ideally, that should be your aim, right? And here, again, is what I was talking about earlier about the jargon. So, you the jargon from your field. Is always feasible by many of us in different disciplines. We know this, but it's a skill and something that one needs to do and to learn quite a lot, right? There's an online space. Some of you might be familiar with it. It's called The Conversation. And the conversation is a platform that allows us as researchers the opportunity to present our work for non-academic audiences. So you take the research that you've done, and then you just think about an opinion piece in like the Mail and Guardian. For 800 to 900 words, you engage and speak about the work that you've done. And this is meant to assist you to get wider audience and readership for your work, because they also link it to your published work. If your work is published, then people can go and read the full paper there. It's good. It's good for might not knowledge of. We don't do this work for ourselves only. We're doing this work because we want to contribute not only to knowledge, we also want to contribute towards bringing about in society that will contribute towards 1, 2, and 3. How is it going to assist us to deal with the social ills and challenges? And for us to be able to do that, therefore, our work needs to be able to be relatable to those in our communities, those in our society. It's very important. Okay. Now what I'm going to do as I move towards the end of my presentation for tonight was that I thought it might be a bit useful to give you some samples of the abstract from different fields, if you will, because I know some of us are in the sciences, some of us are in the social science, hardcore sciences, pure sciences, or in the human sciences or social sciences, or the humanities. So just thinking about your own discipline and where you're situated, what are some of the possibilities in terms of thinking about writing in abstract. So I'm going to read these out to you, as I would like you to, as you listen and you look at them, you're also thinking about the different steps that I spoke about, but also thinking about your own work and how you might possibly structure your own work, thinking about these important criteria and aspects that need to be in your abstract. Okay. So the first one, you will see I highlighted things that I would like you to take note of: the introduction, the purpose and methods, theory, results, and conclusion. Right. So many women derive meaning from their lived experiences of gender and sexuality across different contexts. Right? You're contextualizing. You're providing a brief background. You are bringing your broadly a broad overview, bringing your reader into the conversation. Okay. In this article, we explore the personal narratives of women based in the rural community of Nkomazi district in South Africa, and provide insights from group discussions held with this group of women. So the purpose, what is it that you're doing? You're exploring something. How are you doing this? You are conducting group discussions, so focus group discussions as the way in which you're collecting your data and explaining why you're doing it that way. And then theory. Drawing from African personhood theory, we question and deconstruct socio-culturally constructed notions of what it means to be a woman who constantly has to negotiate notions of gender, sexuality, and personhood. Okay, so now that you've done that and conducted the focus group discussions, what is it that you found? The findings reveal women's interpretations of their sexualities and sexual expression as shaped by heteropatriarchal sexual scripts. right? What emerges are women's narratives revealing that throughout history and contemporary times, colonial patriarchal constructions of gender and sexuality continue to shape and dictate women's lived experiences. And so overall, this study, you see here the filler. So it's the first time we're seeing a filler word. So you can have just one of it, but try not to overdo it. Overall, this study highlights intersectionalities of women's experiences of gender, personhood, race, age, and sexuality in the changing socio-political contexts. And as a result, we conclude by calling for a rethinking in how women's bodies are constantly policed and governed. We argue that women should be able to inhabit spaces and move freely without systematic surveillance on their personhood. So that's one sample. There's one thing that I noted here that I would also like to bring to attention. Remember when I was talking about one or two sentences, you'll see these authors went home a bit with the results. So they actually have 3 sentences under results. And this they managed to get away with, because if you look at the introduction, it's only just 1 sentence, and then they went straight into methodology. So it's about the word count, but it's also trying to balance, right, everything. So it balances that way, in that we have this flowing narrative that flows from one point to the other, still within the word limit, but still having a narrative that's carved together. Okay, so that's one sample. And then the second sample, trying to also provide different focus and different kinds of studies, with the hope that you can also see yourself and see your own study or frame, so that as you think about your own abstract, you already have an idea of what that might look like, right, as you formulate it. Okay. Overview. Study skills and student satisfaction with their performance positively affect their academic achievement. Okay. The current research was carried out to investigate the correlation of study skills with academic achievement among the medical and pharmacy students in 2013. Okay, so that's how you introduce us to this. This descriptive analytical study was conducted on 148 students of basic medical sciences and pharmacy through convenience sampling. Data were collected by a valid and reliable questionnaire consisting of 2 sections: demographic information and questions about daily study hours, study skills in 6 domain, and student satisfaction with study skills. Collected data were analyzed by SPSS 16. And then the results show that in total, 10.9 of the students were reported to have favorable skills. The minimum score was found for preparation for examination domain. Okay. Also, a significantly positive correlation was observed between student study skills and their GPA of previous term, right, and satisfaction with study skills. The findings indicated that students' study skills need to be improved. So that was like the core finding, right? Given the significant relationship between study skills and their grade point average as an index of academic achievement and satisfaction, it is necessary to promote the students' study skills. These skills are suggested to be reinforced with more emphasis on weaker domains. Okay, so that's the second sample. And then the second last sample, again, it's a different angle in how one writes a paper or puts together an abstract. And this one, I think it is based on more of a conceptual paper, and not where data was collected, but bringing different people together. So, current discussions of peace and security related policy in Africa focus disproportionately on the work of governmental actors, regional organizations, and the African Union. Implicit in such a framing, the argument comes in, is the assumption that policy change is driven primarily by state and international institutions. Already you can see the authors coming in with the problem. So what is the problem, right? The framing and the assumption of the policy change is what we have here. So what they then do is that they come in and say, with this paper, they're pushing back on that assumption by showing how girls and young women's grassroots activism can function as a source of innovative policy making, right? So different ways in which we can think about policy and who gets to make policy. Writing as a collective of activist scholars on the ground in all these countries, we identify 4 key strategies driving intergenerational peace-building work. And these are working on multiple scales, building networks of care and solidarity, mobilizing difference as a resource, and recognizing that violence takes many shapes. By identifying key threads that link women and girls' intergenerational organizing work across diverse national contexts, we aim to expand core understandings of who counts as a policymaker. So if you're someone who's interested in issues of policy and policy making, reading these abstracts, or if you're doing work on policy and policy making, when you are searching in the search engines, this is something that might come up, and it can be work that you can draw from for your own research. All right. And then lastly, I've put this in here in thinking about that comment that I made earlier around the jargon that we use in the research that we conduct, and how that then looks like within the abstracts that we write. So here's an example of an abstract from engineering, right? Biomedical engineering. Already the beginning. Artery biomechanics may play an important role during the development of atherosclerosis. Can't even say that. Atherosclerosis. Artery stiffness is used clinically to predict the risk of this atherosclerosis. However, lab testing of whole arteries has produced ambiguous results. This is the challenge. The plagues extend through only part of the vessel wall. Consequently, an accurate description of the biomechanics of atherosclerosis will require testing of local mechanical properties. I'm sure, as you can hear, just reading, one needs to understand first what atherosclerosis means, and understand the importance and central nature of it in the study. You will see when you look at the topic, it speaks to the method to expose arterial subendothelium for indentation testing. And as far as I've read, part of what's in the topic does not appear here. And so one wonders then in terms of how the topic is speaking to this. Because the atherosclerotic seems to be also central and the core. So it goes on that to facilitate the hypothesis that they have, they sought to develop a method to remove artery endothelium, right, which is there in the topic. And the core, the interest is to look at how the artery endothelium can be removed, right? So they evaluated and refined 3 methods from the literature, and they mention those methods. And then as they conclude, they argue that immunohistochemistry experiments suggest that scraping specifically exposes the internal elastic lamina. Scraping is an effective and reproducible method to remove arterial endothelium and expose the intimal subendothelium. This result, based on the study and the research that they did, the experiment that they did, is an important prerequisite for high-resolution indentation testing to ascertain the role of subendothelial mechanics in atherosclerosis. Okay, so for those who are not in engineering, if I were to ask, did you understand this makes sense to you? And if you were to speak to someone who's not in the field, would they easily understand it? So this is an example of how in other fields, it might not necessarily be easy not to use the jargon, right? Because the descriptors or what the work is about is based on these scientific names that one would use. And if writing, therefore, for an academic audience in an academic journal or article or in your dissertation, this might be okay. But if you were to then translate this, would you be able to? So if you were to write, for example, for the conversation, what are some of the ways in which you can still be able to speak about the importance of the procedure that has been described and the test and the results that were found, but in a way that people who are not in this field will be able to understand, right? And I think it's important that we are able to communicate the work that we're doing. All right. And with this, I will pause and then open up for questions and discussions around how to formulate an abstract. Okay, I'll just give it a minute or two for you to think about the question or questions that you want to ask, or maybe some comments that you might want to make that could get maybe other colleagues or other students to also think about as well. Okay, so there's only one question so far from Anonymous, who was asking, but I think this question came earlier before I got to discuss, and I hope that it's been answered. But the question was, is there a difference in how long the abstract should be if it's a thesis? Because remember, it could be writing a thesis, a dissertation, or a journal article. So as I indicated in my presentation, often when you're writing a thesis or dissertation, these academic thesis or dissertation, we're often very lenient in that it can be as long as 300 words. We often say it should not be longer than 1 page. So if you just think of a page, then that should be fine. That should be enough. Okay, because remember also at UNISA, your abstract. So if you want to go to broaden up a bit and elaborate a bit in your abstract, you are free to do so as long as it's not a page. But also remember that your abstract is going to be translated into 2 indigenous languages, right? So that is important, that as you're writing your abstract, you really need to write it in a way that tells the story of what your thesis was about and what it found. Because we will also have it in the indigenous languages, so that if other people also read it in other languages, and that they may not necessarily get the time or be able to read the whole thesis, that at least they get that opportunity to be able to get a glimpse of your work, an overview of your work from this thesis. Okay, so it will be in 3 languages, in English and in 2 other languages. Okay. I hope that answers you. We don't really have a limit in terms of word count, as far as I know. But obviously we encourage that it should not be more than a page. Okay. What if you're writing an abstract based on literature review, not necessarily based on your own work? Okay, I'm going to assume that you are talking about critical literature review, where you are writing a paper that is not based on like empirical work in a sense of collecting data and putting together the work. If you will remember the sample that I gave that was talking about policy making, look at that as an example of what you might want to imagine a critical literature review abstract to be looking like. So with a critical literature review, you won't necessarily have the introduction, the methodology, the results, and the conclusion in that way. But of course, you write in a way that says, okay, in this literature on this particular issue abounds. Like there's a lot of literature on this particular issue, but I'm here exploring, or I'm offering a critical literature review, looking at the work that's been written on this particular issue, maybe between 2010 and 2020, looking at what has been written on this. So I'm going to be comparing literature, or I'm going to be providing a critique on literature. And this is what I'm going to be looking at, and this is what I'll be highlighting. But remember, when you're writing your abstract, you're writing your abstract after you've done the research. You write your abstract after you've done the literature. So you'll then be reporting to us that you've conducted a critical literature review that was focusing on this particular issue, and you looked at literature that was published between this year and that year, and you looked at 50 articles. And from these 50 articles, these are the issues that you are highlighting that came up for you. And then you identified these gaps, and you are suggesting that this and that needs to be done, or you're saying that there seems to be a lot of literature, or the literature on this issue seems to be leaning towards this direction or leaning towards that direction. So it will not necessarily be as straightforward in terms of introduction, methodology, analysis, and your conclusion, but it will still have that general idea, because you would have conducted research. But your conducting of research was of a critical review of literature. And that's why it also needs to be systematic and structured. And you would indicate what literature did you review? What was your criteria in terms of selecting what to review? Is it only articles? Is it articles and books and literature? And was it period specific? And how did you do this review? What were you looking at? What were you not looking at? And what was the purpose of that review? And what is it that you found at the end? So what is it that we can learn as a result of this critical review that you did? Okay, so I hope that's helpful in terms of you thinking about how to think about the possibility of writing a literature review. And I like this question also because as you are working on your own articles, you're going to be producing articles from either your thesis or your dissertation. And as you're thinking about how many articles can I write and what could the focus of my articles be, one of those articles can be a critical literature review. So your literature chapter is also a very important chapter because it also teaches us something. It also brings in a new or renewed understanding. And it also brings to our awareness also the kind of work that's been done, the focus of the work that's been done, and when that work was done, right? recent literature, or is it all maybe from 20 years ago, or what was said about this topic 20 years ago? And when we look at what's being said about this topic now, is there a difference? Has there been a shift? What have the conversations changed? What is now new around that particular area in terms of the lens that those who are doing research in that particular field have been focusing on? And that, for you as a scholar, is an opportunity to therefore be in conversation with these authors, and then also come with your own angle where you critique, where you engage with this literature. And with that, you can easily get a published paper out of that. And if you're going to be having a published paper based on your literature review, then obviously you're going to need to have an abstract as well. All right. I hope that is useful. As I answer your questions, if maybe you have a follow-up or I didn't answer it or misunderstood your question, please go ahead and type again a follow-up or maybe seek for more clarity. Okay. Is the abstract necessary? So I'm not sure, Lily, if you're saying is the abstract necessary or the abstract required in the research proposal. In terms of required, the abstract is not required. But you will see when you submit your ethical clearance form, in the ethical clearance form, there is a requirement for an overview, a summary of your proposal, a summary of what you want to do. So you can also think about that or look at that as somewhat of an abstract and approach it that way. So you provide a summary of what you're proposing to do, how you're going to do it, and how and all the different steps that you're going to do it in. Remember, we said in an abstract, provide work that you've already done. In your proposal, you're still proposing. You say, this is what I'm hoping to achieve. I intend to use this particular methodology. And you might end up going in a different direction. You might end up, there might be some changes along the way. So for your proposal, in terms of the requirement of the university, it's not a requirement. Maybe your supervisor can say, just write a summary, put something together that assists us to be able to do this. That's something, it's their prerogative to be able to do that, but it is not a requirement, no. Okay, it's not a requirement. And if it was, because the second part of your question is, how is it structured? If it was, then it would speak to what I had said earlier, that the abstract should not be in the future. And obviously for a proposal, this would be in the future because you are intending to use qualitative research and you intend to conduct data using interviews, right? So this would be future oriented. And if it were to be a requirement in the proposal, it would make sense having it that way because this is what you're planning to do. It's not something that you're doing already, or it's not something that you've done. So it would, you know, for all intents and purposes, it would be future oriented. All right, so that's how it would be structured. That is not a requirement for you, for your master's and your PhD. For the proposal part of it, but you are going to write it for the actual thesis and dissertation. You're going to write an abstract as a requirement. Okay. An honors student who have not done any research or interviews, should the abstract be in the past or future? And in findings part, should we include it or not? Yeah, you see, I think this goes hand in hand with the question that Lily just asked about the proposal, because I think at your level, when you have not done the research, should you be required to write an abstract, it would be in the future tense. because this is not something that you would have done yet. So obviously, past tense or present tense, unless it's already been accepted, right? So when you're saying I am doing this, I'm collecting data this way, I am planning to. So it's actually very much in the future tense. So it cannot be in the past. Because also, as you say, you've not done any research, you've not conducted any interviews. So should it be a requirement, it would possibly be in the future, because then you would be saying you're giving a summary of what you intend to do, right? So it would be in the future. I've seen in some of the conferences, for example, because when you want to attend a conference, you are requested to submit an abstract. And sometimes colleagues would submit an abstract on a paper that they've not put together as yet, right? And so they would say, in this paper, I aim to provide this and that. So something that they're imagining to do, but maybe that they've not thought through yet, or that they've not done yet. So it is possible to do it that way. But as I said, if you're doing this for publication, and obviously, if this is going to be in your dissertation or your thesis, it's going to be at the end, obviously, then it's going to be in the past, or you can write it in the active present tense. But it would not be in the future. And if you're submitting it to a journal, it would not be in the future. So if it's work that has not been done, and you are required to write an abstract, which I doubt, but if that does happen, I would imagine that it would then be in the future tense, okay? Because it would be based on something that you are still anticipating to do. Okay. Is it okay to write the contribution of the study, for example, contribution to practice or body of literature in the conclusion of the abstract? Samuel, most definitely, most definitely. So your last sentence or your last two sentences of the abstract could be this. So as part of your conclusion / recommendation, this is what you would include. That the study or the findings contribute to the ways in which we can rethink what phenomena. So you speak to how it's contributing to the body of literature. This adds to the existing body of literature on this particular issue, right? So it provides a different frame, a different understanding of a particular issue. Or you can say, this will contribute towards how psychology practitioners think about the ways in which ADHD is responded to, right? So then it's got implications for practice. So if I am a psychologist and I'm a practitioner, so I'm a therapist, reading your work can assist me to rethink maybe, or to learn something new or a different way in which I can respond or attend to people with ADHD. So you're saying this has got practical implications in that it can offer renewed understanding, or it can offer a new model of how we can respond to this particular phenomena, or to this particular issue, which you would then mention. So yes, yes, and yes, by all means, you can do that. And including that in your abstract, believe me, is one of the ways to make sure that 100 people will immediately want to download your paper and read your paper. So you most definitely can and should write about the contribution of your study for practice or for the body of knowledge. Okay. All right. We have covered background introduction, problem statement, purpose statement, and review. Currently, the last assignment requests us to write an abstract. Person was asking about the honors. So you're doing everything step by step. All right. The last assignment requires you to write an abstract. So the question is, should we include findings or not? And should it be written in the past, present, or future? Okay. So if you include which findings, because you're not saying that you've done the research and you have the analysis and the findings. Because you're saying you've covered the background, the introduction, the problem statement, the purpose statement, and the review. And now with this assignment, you have to write the abstract. And you're asking whether you should include the findings. So I have a question for you. Have you already done the research? Right, so it looks like there are all these different assignments where you cover all these different things. If I would be correct in assuming that the study itself was also conducted and you have the findings of the study, then yes, you should include the findings as well in the if you do have the findings, it would make sense to have the findings. So you'll start with the background and indicate what the problem, what the issue is, and then what is it that you did, and then what is it that you found. So the findings are very important. And if this is something that's already been done, as I said with the previous questions, then it would be in the either in the past or the present tense, right? So it's going to be in the past or the present tense if you've already conducted the study. And I'm working on assumptions here because I'm not sure where you're at in terms of the actual research itself. If the data was already collected and you've analyzed the data, you have the findings, then you have to include that in the abstract. If, on the other hand, the study has not been conducted, then you would need to write in the future tense. But your question also confuses me because you're saying, should we include findings? And by you saying that, I am assuming, therefore, that you do have findings, because why would you include something that you do not have? So I'm going to assume that you do have findings. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Dineo. Okay, so it's been clarified for me. Thank you. So it appears that the study has not been conducted. So my question would be, what findings then are you talking about? You cannot include findings if the study has not been conducted, because if the study has not been conducted, then my assumption is you need to write in the future tense. And you cannot include the findings, no, because the findings are not there, because you have not conducted the study. Okay. Sometimes you see keywords at the end. What kind of abstracts are those? For your thesis, for your dissertation, for the articles that you are going to be writing, keywords are required. It's almost always. There are hardly any journals that do not require keywords. So for you, for your thesis and your dissertation, we do require keywords. You need to have keywords. So, and these you would find at the end of the abstract, right? So the abstract is a standalone paragraph. And then at the bottom of that paragraph, so there will be like a space or two in between. At the bottom of that paragraph, you will then have keywords. And they usually request anything between 5 to 10 at the most. It's usually 5 to 7 or 5 to 8. But it's 5 to 10 at the very most keywords for your article. And again, as I said at the beginning, keywords are very, very important. So you look at your work, you look at your whole content, and then you say, what are the key words in this dissertation? What are the key words in the article that are at the core of what this work is about, right? So if you are writing about the transformation of higher education or the decolonization of the university, so I would automatically expect to see the word decolonization under your keywords. I would automatically expect to see transformation under your keywords. So look at what are the core themes, the core concepts that are in your work that speak to what the whole work is about. So if you think about it that way, that should assist you to be able to work and to decide on which keywords are going to assist the reader to be able to get a glimpse of what your whole work is about. Okay. And another way of thinking of it is think of your keywords. So put 5 keywords together. A word, a word, a word, a word, a word. And if you were to take those words and then write sentences based on those words, would the narrative make sense? So you've got 5 keywords, and then I say, okay, write a sentence for each of these words that you've identified. As you write those sentences, if I read those 5 sentences based on your keywords, I need to be able to make sense of the work that you've done. Okay. I hope that helps. All right. Okay. Thank you, Anonymous, for the appreciation note. I'm not seeing any more questions. Okay, I'll just give it a minute in case maybe you're still thinking or formulating your question. I will just give you a moment to do that. And if you don't have any more questions, that's also okay. As I always say, there's going to be opportunities in the future in other sessions, either my sessions or my colleagues, the other colleagues who are also providing sessions in their sessions as well, that if maybe you have questions in the future, there will be opportunities for you to ask the questions. And if you are, when you are on your own writing, reading, and issues pop up for you, you've got questions, jot those down. And when we are together again, by all means, please do ask those questions. And towards the later part of the year, we're also going to have sessions. If you have your schedules, you would know. We're going to have sessions and opportunities where you can ask any question that you might have. It does not have to be a question related to a particular theme or topic. Like today, the questions are around formulating an abstract because that's what we're talking about. But we're going to have open sessions where you can ask any questions related to your journey, your journey as you are writing, your journey as you're thinking, your journey as you get stuck here and there, some of the challenges that you're experiencing. We'll have an opportunity to also have a conversation around that. Okay. Yes, so I was saying I also have a quick announcement. An invite. You are aware of this, but we're just reminding you that you can still submit your chapters in progress, so your draft chapters, for those of you who are already busy with your chapters, and for those of you who are still busy with your proposals, you can submit your proposal. So you have the opportunity this year to be able to get feedback as you go on with your. So if you are done with your proposal and you would like your proposal to be reviewed for us to have a look at your proposal, please feel free to submit it. You know where you can submit these to Ms. Dube or Brownwen, and you will be getting feedback on this. This offers you the opportunity to have a second or a third eye in addition to your supervisor or supervisors. You also get the opportunity to get feedback also from us as well. So this is just an announcement to say the invite is open. You have the opportunity to submit, and I would like to encourage you to submit your draft proposal or to submit your draft chapters. And I see in the address you need. So I look forward to receiving some of your draft chapters or even your proposal in progress. Okay, and I'm checking again. I don't see any more questions. So I'm going to assume that we are sorted for today. I would like to thank you. Thank you for attending the session. Thank you for all your questions. It shows me that you were engaged and that you were keenly listening to the presentation, and I'm very much appreciative of that, and I look forward to our next session together. And with that, have a good evening. Goodbye, everybody.